Safeguarding practice is for schools and colleges to be clear in advance as to what local processes are in place and what support can be accessed when sexual violence or sexual harassment has occurred. It is thus essential that victims are protected, offered appropriate support, and every effort is made to ensure the education is not disrupted. Sexual violence and sexual harassment in the educational sector is not tolerated and is dealt with severely by the Line Ministry, as with the alleged recent rape at Jan Moore Secondary School. Joining us in studio to give us an update on this matter, as well as other policies, is Ayesha Wentworth, who is a clinical psychologist in the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. Good morning, Ayesha, and welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Good morning, Denver. Thank you for having me.
In the first instance, I do think it's important to take stock of policies or regulations that are in place to deal with relations between learners and teachers.
Okay. Denver, according to the Education Act of 2001 and the, the Teachers Code of Conduct, this type of behavior is not allowed. And teachers are, like any other public servant, subject to the Public Service Act and the Public Service Staff Rules, which demands a high standard of behavior and also actions from our public servants. In addition to this, from the Ministry of Education side, we also have the National School Safety Framework, which specifically deals with teacher-learner relationships and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in that sense. We also know that the Child Care and Protection Act is also in place to protect our learners and children in general. And it also, the CCPA allows for the establishment of a sex offender database, although this is not yet in place, but it is allowed for by the Act itself. So I think that there are a lot of policies in place as well. You know, we also have the Combating of Rape Act, which is also applicable to all Namibian citizens, not just teachers and learners, but that is also guiding us, the Combating of Immoral Practices Act. So there is a lot of legislation in place to protect our citizens.
What does that ultimately mean, abuse and rape aside? Does it mean that a teacher, irrespective of his or her age, is not allowed to have a consensual relationship with a learner?
Denver, I think if you look at the power dynamics there, how consensual can it really, really be? A teacher is in a position of power and a learner is not. And that power dynamic ultimately cannot, I don't know how consensual you can really call that at the end of the day. Yeah.
Do these policies also address relationships between learners or amongst learners?
Not per se. I wouldn't say that they specifically deal with that, but within our life skills curriculum and within what we try to teach our children at school, we try to teach them about having healthy relationships with their peers. And as is wont with adolescents, there are hormones involved and there may be relationships. So what we do as a ministry is try to safeguard our children and teach them how to be in healthy relationships.
Being cognizant of the fact that there are policies and regulations in place, but also legislation in place to prohibit a romantic relationship between a teacher and a learner. What repercussions are there for both parties once such relationships are uncovered?
Well, Denver, it is on a case-by-case basis. So, for example, if the learner is underaged and there is a relationship between a teacher and a learner, that becomes a criminal offence because it's statutory rape, even if the learner, again, like I said, that cannot be consensual because the learner is underaged.
At least consent under duress.
Yes. When the learner is of age, for example, in school, it's still, the onus still rests on the teacher, who is the adult and who is the person in a position of power. So they are subject to the Public Service Act and staff rules, where we then, it's a misconduct. It's considered misconduct by the teacher, and there's an investigation, and depending on the outcome, the teacher would then face the consequences, suspension or expulsion from their work.
Are there any repercussions for the learner under those circumstances?
Under the circumstances of being of age.
Being of age and alleged consent between learner and teacher.
Again, Denver, there cannot be consent when the teacher is in that position of power. So we then want to support that learner to provide them with guidance and counseling in order to help them understand that even though they may think it is consensual, it is not.
Very well. In instances where a teacher allegedly rapes or molests or abuses a learner, what are the repercussions for such an educator?
The same, Denver. Internally, from a ministerial point of view, we would then follow our own internal investigation. But again, it's a criminal offence. So if a charge is laid, the police would then also get involved and have their own investigation.
That brings us to the alleged matter at Jan Moore Secondary School. Under those circumstances, a charge has also been laid and the suspect has been arrested and has appeared in court already. So one does not want to preempt the court proceedings, certainly not.
Definitely.
But the ministry has launched an internal investigation.
Yes.
Are you able to update us on that matter, please?
Denver, you know this is a very sensitive case and there has been a lot of public outcry. But as you rightfully say, we cannot be judge and jury and the person is innocent until proven guilty. The ministry is actively busy engaging in our internal investigation to understand and get a better picture of the situation, but we also do not want to preempt those outcomes and crucify somebody before we know exactly what are the facts and what is the situation on the ground.
Notwithstanding those realities, two matters need to be addressed at this juncture. Firstly, there are allegations that this alleged rapist had been perpetrating similar offences in the past, yet remained at the exact same school for years. What is your take on that matter?
Denver, I think this is also part of our investigation, is looking into the previous allegations that came to the fore. But in the course of any investigation, one has to look at whether there is enough evidence for someone to be proven guilty. And I think if that were the case, if that would probably have been what had happened, that there wasn't sufficient evidence or something like that, that we could not release the teacher from their position. But again, it's an ongoing investigation. We will look into previous allegations and try to understand what was the course of action that happened at that point.
The other hurdle that the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture now faces in relation to this alleged incident is that this teacher is reported to have resigned in the meantime. Where does that leave the ministry? Certainly, if I resign as a teacher, I no longer work for the ministry, I no longer report to the ministry. So the steps that you can take internally are very limited if they exist at all.
Denver, I think in this instance, what would happen is that the ministry will continue with this investigation, and should the teacher be found guilty, either by ourselves or the or the criminal investigation that is going on, the teacher would not be allowed to re-enter the teaching service at any point. And this is also covered in the Child Care and Protection Act. Anybody with a criminal record is not allowed to work with children. So we are covered in that sense, that should they be found guilty, they will not be allowed back into the teaching service.
I can imagine that the database of offenders that you referred to earlier is what is known to the layperson as a registry.
Yes.
A sexual offenders registry. So would such a person, if found guilty, although they may have left the service of the ministry in the meantime, be placed on such a database too, in order to prevent exactly that, them re-entering the system?
Re-entering the system at any point, because any work with children, this person may apply to work at a daycare or at a place of safety, which is not necessarily in the teaching service, but working with children. So they would not be allowed to work in any setting that would get them in contact with children.
You mentioned earlier that that database system is not operational yet. Why not?
Dana, as you know, the regulations of the CCPA only really came into place in 2018. So it is a process of working with the various elements of the Act and putting them into operation. And this is also a long process. And, you know, there are a lot of legal issues also involved in that. It's an issue of privacy. So it's not as straightforward as just setting something up like that. You have to look at all the ramifications and all the elements attached to that.
But you would agree it is a matter that needs to be prioritized?
Most definitely, Denver. I think the ministry has also developed a training manual for our teachers on the identification of sexual violence in schools, and we are currently busy rolling that out, because I think that is also one of the challenges, is that usually these types of offences is not a once-off. It is a systematic sort of process. And we need our teachers to be more equipped to be able to identify the warning signs of these types of situations that might occur.
What systems have been put in place at Jan Moore specifically in the meantime to deal with the matter as the investigation unfolds?
The ministry, from the regional office as well as head office, is really very supportive of the school. Our regional school counsellors are going to the school on a regular basis to provide psychosocial support to the learners in case there are any other learners who would like to come and speak, who have been traumatized in any way. The life skills teacher there is very good. They have 2 life skills teachers, so they are also really being there. The principal is consistently sending the message to the learners that he has an open door. They must please come and talk to him. What we also have encouraged the school to do is to set up a, shall we say, a box where learners can also anonymously come and put in a note or say something like that, so that we can understand the situation on the ground. I myself have been going to the school, working on the investigation, but also just being there to help the school and guide the school on how to implement Safe School framework and bring some of those elements into the school system.
Ayesha, before we let you go, any concluding remarks this morning, please?
I think that as a ministry, we have robust policies and programs, and all schools really need to look at implementing our Safe School framework, our school health policy, because really, these are preventative measures. It's not interventions, it's prevention. If we create a culture of care in our schools, if we create the type of environment where our learners can come forward and talk to us, then we can prevent things from going this far, or from these types of incidences happening again. So I urge schools to please look at their school safety framework, implement those measures so that we protect our children and our teachers.
Thank you very much and best of luck.
Thank you very much, Denver.
That was Ms. Ayesha Wentworth, clinical psychologist at the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, and she spoke about the robust policies that are in place to address sexual violence in the school system. Please stay tuned.